Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. It's Monday, we're going to start a new theme. This week's theme is unusual jazz. We're primarily looking for jazzy compositions with instruments you just wouldn't associate with jazz typically, and I'm pretty excited for this. Now, to kick today off, we're going to be looking at a band called Neptunian Maximalism. Yes. Give me all of Neptune, I suppose. The track we're looking at is Nganga. Let's dive in and see what they're up to. Okay, a little bit of syncopation on that second bar, but we're pretty solidly in a 3/4. I love how percussively dominant this is so far. There's 4 percussion instruments at least. We have the grunting, and occasionally the horns. They're actually the least present. Interesting, the 3 and the 4 both work. The cymbals, I think, are definitely leading into a 4, but everything else is kind of sitting on a 3 vibe. I'd wager it's 4/4. Ooh, we got some throat singing too. The bass drum sound is not a part of the drum kit, I don't think. I'd wager that's a larger bass drum hit with the mallet, of course, but someone's actually hitting it. It just sounds too large to be whatever size usually gets put on a drum kit. It's interesting how all of these drums aren't exactly in sync and step with each other, and it kind of creates this rumbling, this rolling across the beats. Got some sort of keyboard synthesizer over there on the left. It's like this drum with a tambourine, just laying down this beat, no emphasis at all. You don't know what the strangest thing is, though? The closest analogy I have for this is Portal. And I think if you know what kind of music Portal makes, you're like, oh, actually, Bryan, that's, yeah, okay, I could see that. And you might not have thought it before, but it makes perfect sense when you look at it that way. Um, I just, wow. Uh, okay. I guess let's start from there. If you don't know who Portal is, black metal, doom metal, somewhere in one of those extreme metals, they make music that is rhythmically loose, harmonically challenging, and very loud and noisy. And at least the song that I checked out from them, which was called something in I. Oh no, Glomorphanol something. Glumorphanol. Uh, it felt like watching an elder god emerge from, into our realm and the insanity of trying to comprehend this otherworldly being. That's what the music felt like to me. And I kind of get a lot of that same stuff here. Maybe not specifically the idea of the elder god. This music is more comprehensible. It is still a bit antagonistic, and it pushes against many conventions, but it feels of the earth, at least, of our reality, in a way that separates it a bit from Portal. But the idea of we're sitting within a specific sound and being simultaneously masters of their sound while also sounding like complete noise, and just having so much precision over the noise to craft a specific vibe and atmosphere of antagonism and friction. I mean, that's pretty much how I would describe Portal as well. This group just goes about it in a different way and aims for a different atmosphere, but it's still an exceptionally challenging piece, probably to play just as well as it is to listen to, but it does such an effective job at hitting a specific atmosphere. And I think that's really what I want to focus on today. I mean, to start, instrumentation. There's a couple of horns, all saxophones, I think. This is pretty much the end of the relationship to jazz instrumentally, although I suppose there is a drum kit in here and we could say that both share that. But the drum kit here is played so differently, and it shares its production area with a bunch of other percussion as well. There is a full sized symphonic bass drum in here. There's all sorts of different hand drums that I can hear. Uh, there is some sort of tom like drum with something on it. I kind of envision the drum with a tambourine resting on the rim, and a little bit on the drum head. So when you hit the drum head, the tambourine shakes a little bit as well, and you get a nice um, metallic sizzle out of the hit as well. We heard a ton of that at the end. I mean, just right dum 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 dum, just consistent in the final 2 minutes or so. Um, there's an organ or a synthesizer of some sort there in our final moments. We can't forget about the vocals, the really ominous, low speaking part. There's throat singing. There's the hoo ha, We got those in there as well. It's just, there's probably a bunch of stuff I'm missing too. There's so many textures in here. And I mentioned there were like four percussive instruments, and I only listed two, three. There's so much I'm probably forgetting. This is just incredible from a percussive area. And it makes me curious where this is from. What are they called? Neptunian Maximalism. Belgium. That would not have been my first guess. Man, one of the members is listed as playing the sound effects. That's pretty good. We have a couple of people who play drums and percussion, just as a blanket term. I'm kind of curious what our percussion is. Um, Also, there's not that many people here. There's four, five, six, seven, 8, 9, 10, 11. I lied, 12. There's 12 people here. I was looking at the ones that were hyperlinked. I guess nobody else has rate your music pages for them. Yeah, artist pages. So I just saw four names and then just a bunch of white text. But yeah, there's, what did I say, 12 people here. That's pretty big. There's just a lot going on. And it's just, well, here's the thing, right? Is this jazz? That's not normally a question I think I'd pull up in a vacuum, but it is unusual jazz week. What's jazzy in here? Well, there is a swing section. So we do have a jazzy rhythmic idea in the drum kit and sax alone. I don't think anybody else really got swingy. So we had both of those for about a minute or two, and that's really as far as the rhythmic comparison goes. So we should look at melodic comparison, harmonic comparison, chord progressions. Is there a chord progression in here? I don't know. Well, let's look at the notes that are played. All of them? I don't know that I heard a key tone in here. It's sort of noise a lot of the time, and the atonality of chromaticism, I would say. That isn't to say that any moments in the piece I was like, oh, the chromatic scale right there. They never really went that route and aimed for the dissonance of the chromatic scale, but I don't feel like there's any tonal home here either to say that this was in the key of anything. So I can't really say it's jazzy on the harmonic front either. What about melody? What melody? At best, we have series of notes coming out of our saxophone and synthesizer, but melodic? Not really. A repeated phrase that we could call a lick for jazz or a riff for rock terminology. Nothing in here that I'd say was repeated in any capacity. Not really jazz, is it? And then we get the gotcha. The big moment where I reveal actually it is jazz. You just have to free your mind and look at the wider expanse of free jazz. And yeah, it's jazz by way of free jazz. It has a lot of the components that we've seen in other free jazz projects, like I'm blanking out. We haven't done a lot of free jazz on the channel, so I'm gonna forgive myself for forgetting. But yeah, it's a bunch of instruments kind of doing their own thing. Some of them work in tandem with each other, but most of it is just sort of noisy improv. or at least it sounds like improv on the surface. It might not be. Speaking of, I was informed that swans, we checked out the seer last week, mostly improvised. They start with one idea and they build on it through rehearsals and live settings, and it's never really in a finished state. It just keeps changing and building and expanding. And so I thought it was really funny that I stopped talking about stuff like this and like the seer, hypothesizing that it was probably an improvisational piece because it would be a nightmare to pre-compose, because every time I said that I was wrong. They're like, no, they have sheet music for this. And I'm like, why? How? Why would somebody do this when they can just improvise and get a similar effect? So here we are again. This feels improvised to me. And someone's going to tell me today, because I can't be right with this, actually, they have sheet music out for it. They pre composed it and memorized it. It just, I don't. I don't know. I'm waiting to see the comments. I really am, to see how they go about this. Because my hypothesis, as usual with this style of music, because it's how I would go about doing it, is improvisation. Maybe there's some sections that you have a bit more planned out. But in something like this, where it's more about the emotion, and that emotion and atmosphere doesn't really change over the course of the 8 minutes, having a couple of key points to say, okay, at minute six, this instrument comes in. At minute three, this instrument goes out. At minute, four, the drums are going to do this specific rhythmic phrase, play off of it if you like, and having guidelines and maybe some checkpoints of when specific things might change, or even a moment to bring something specific to the fray. But to write out every single note for every single instrument for this seems like a lot of work with little payoff. I don't see the end result being much different. And that's not to say that they didn't. They could have easily pre-composed this. I just, again, I don't really see that big of a benefit from doing so. But that's just me. Particularly because I don't have a mind for this. I could not pre-compose this. It would be a lot easier for me, and I'd probably actually get the project done if I gave guidelines, and treated it more like an avant-garde piece than a pre-composed free jazz piece. So it's jazzy. There's unusual instruments. Checks off both of our criteria for the week. What's actually going on here, though? A lot of noise. That's the end of the video. I'll catch you guys later. No, here's the thing. There's some really neat specific ideas going on in here. And there's certain elements that feel like folk music merged with free jazz. The heavy use of percussion, the vocalizations of the hu and the ha, the throat singing. There's a lot of traditional music from a region. It said Belgium, and that still seems odd to me. Maybe it's not. Maybe a lot of this is in Belgian folk music. I'm not going to say I have a lot of experience with it, but I was picturing something um, Asian, possibly even African, given the heavy rhythmic usage. But even that though, right? Let me check this out. It's multicultural, isn't it? It's not drawing on any one specific era or group or region of music. It sort of has little splashes from all over the world and all through time. It's kind of fascinating, actually, from that perspective. Yeah, because I can't place it. I can't. There's so many influences here. I still find Belgium to be weird because none of my influences go back to it. But it's very possible that one of the people in here, or multiple of the people in here, have different backgrounds and different music, and some of them have enjoyed uh, they have influences from outside of Belgium and all sorts of areas around the globe and all sorts of time periods. And when they all come together, they all get melded into this pot. And what comes out is the most Neptune stuff you can have. Honestly, earthly in maximalism, I think would make more sense here, since it does feel like smashing together so much of earth music. Got that good human music vibes. But it all comes together in a way that feels exceptionally cohesive in the fact that we get this general wall of sound throughout most of the track, but very isolating in that each of the individual instruments rarely work together with something else. At best, we have the rhythmic cohesion between all the percussive instruments, but once we hit pitched instruments, they are completely on their own, doing stuff that is just like a pocket within the wall of sound. So the wall of sound is a giant coat, and each of these songs is in their own little pocket, part of the whole, but separated off into their own area. And yep, Neptunian Maximalism is a musical coat full of pockets. That's wow. I have said some stuff in my time, and that certainly is one of them. And I mean, that's really my description of all of it. I wish I could go into more detail, but it's weird because it's one thing, but it's so many smaller things, right? I can easily say that this is an A section, and I would not be incorrect, I don't think. But depending on what you're looking for, you could probably break this up into as many as 30 sections. It just depends on what type of minutia you're willing to separate out as a new section. The atmosphere doesn't change, and if that's what we're looking at, it's one section song, it's a slow burn. But if you're looking at individual instruments, what the saxophones are doing, they have so many different parts here. You know, even looking at two different instruments, you're going to find so much variety within them, and how they play off of each other, even if they end up repeating something similar that they've done before, that it would be a new part within itself as well. So, yeah, like, I can't even say that this is just a slow burn A section, which is legitimately how I feel it. But I completely understand that there's so much going on in this track, on just such a smaller level, and it depends on how finely tuned you want to set your microscope to determine how many sections you might end up feeling throughout this track. However, I feel it as one, and so that's how I'm going to approach it. This song is meditative music. It was impossible for me to listen to it and not be transported somewhere else, much like Portal's music. It is something that holds a mirror up, I think, to the listener. And as much as you want to dig in and dissect what they're doing, it actively pushes your attention away from itself in a way that, at least to me, represented um, a reluctance to be analyzed and a push for the listener to engage emotionally with it rather than mentally or theoretically, I suppose would be the way to say that. And I went on a big journey. I none of it, like, usually I'll tell you, this is the imagery that it put in my head. But here it was colors and shapes and patterns, like looking into a kaleidoscope where you could continuously turn it, it would never reset to that original point. Like, you rotate a kaleidoscope 360 degrees, you're back to the beginning, but that's not what happened here. It was a kaleidoscope that could not exist in this dimension, but the more you spun it, the more it changed, and it also had color changes in it, um, And some of the times it wasn't abstract pictures I saw, but images of vague ideas. Like, what's really weird in here is that I saw a picture of family. I can't describe it to you. I don't know what it looks like. But when I saw that image, I was like, oh, okay. Makes sense to me. But it wasn't like a picture of parents and kids or something like that. It's bizarre, but I also got like feelings of fear, tension. I mean, the tension throughout here is palpable. Um, but there's also a calm collectedness to it all as well. That I don't know, just feels very soothing to be within at times. As abrasive and challenging as the music is, sometimes it felt nice just to exist within it. There was a certainty to it, despite the seemingly chaotic method of delivery to my ears. I couldn't make any patterns out, but it felt like order. I don't know. It's a really weird track. I think that's why I've had such a tough time talking about it today, putting it into words, is that it really is, at least to me, a feeling. And that isn't to say that that's how it would always be. Maybe I listen to it again 5 times, 10 times, and I can then put into words what it makes me feel. But on the first time, it's simultaneously uh, comforting expectations with wild pieces of unfamiliar entropy to it. And it is a series of conflicting dualities. I don't understand it on my first listen. I don't. And I don't know that I want more. It's a lot of stuff I'm not a big fan of, but I'm intrigued by my experience with it. It's kind of drony. It's free jazz. It's got kind of like a stonery prog rock thing going on as well. Very drug induced music compositions vibe. Um, it's a bunch of styles that I'm just not a big fan of, but when they came together in this, it felt so much larger than the sum of its parts. I don't think there's lyrics here, but I know there were spoken words. I'm gonna look them up and see if there's anything there before we wrap this up. All right. According to Genius, it's an instrumental. Their Bandcamp page also does not have the lyrics, but there's no indication that it has them or doesn't have them. Although it does say here lyrics from Pierre Lanchantin. Who is this? He is not in the band. Imaginary Proto Languages. Now that's a copyright for the entire album. So that could be so many elements here. Uh, some not even in this track, but I don't know. There were words there. So this is a triple album. We have the first album is called To the Moon. The second one, sorry, To the Earth. The second one is To the Moon. And we wrap up with To the Sun, which only has 4 tracks, one of which is 18 and a half, and one of which is 15 and a half. So even though there's only 4 tracks on it, it's still a rather dense third album to finish off this trilogy. And the album overall is called Aeons. Interestingly, this has a secondary title to it. Nganga is the first title. Every song has 2 titles, one in complete capitalization and then another in well, for To the Earth it looks like they're all in French, To the Moon is in English, and To the Sun is back in French? No, you know what? There's only 3 of them that are in English on To the Moon. The rest of those are French as well. So yeah, most of them are in French. This one is,
Grand guérisseur magique de l'ère probocène.
which translates to Great Magical Healer of the Healer. Great Magical Healer of the Proboscene Era. What? I probably should have looked this up before I unpaused my recording, but what is the Proboscene Era? My guess is it's part of a lore within their own story. It doesn't seem to be a real thing, at least. So I don't know. I didn't think I'd have anywhere to take any of this. I'm just presenting information. If any of you are just as curious as I am, this album looks massive, though. I wish I could get a time on this. Rate Your Music doesn't have. Rate Your Music's a really good resource for this. It just puts, total time of album. But I wonder what all 3 albums together are. One person describes it as industrial psychedelic headhunter drone jazz. You know what, man? I don't know what half that is, but I think you're right. 3 distinct styles. Each album in the triple album has a distinct style. Anyways, I'm wrapping this up here. This was something. Those are my thoughts on Neptunian Maximalism's Nganga? No, Nganga. What did you think? Did anything stand out to you? Was there anything that you wanted to add to what I said? Correct me on? Give me your own perspective on? I don't know. Above the comment section is a description box. In there you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3. We have a special selection up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.